My world exploded with a single, searing slap that echoed across the crowded intersection of Michigan Avenue and Randolph Street in Chicago. I'm Judge Lena Washington, 48, a black woman who's spent 2 decades wielding justice in Cook County's courtrooms, my gavel a symbol of fairness. That humid July afternoon, I was just Lena, caught mid-stride, helping a young busker, Malik, 26, whose guitar case had spilled coins like scattered stars after a tourist's clumsy bump. Malik's eyes, wide with panic, met mine as I knelt to gather his earnings, my navy dress creased but my heart steady. Then came Officer Derek Holt, 39, a white cop whose stride screamed authority, his face twisted with a snap judgment that didn't need words. "You stealing, lady," he barked, his voice a blade cutting through the city's hum. I rose, calm but firm. "I'm helping him, officer. No crime here." But Holt's eyes, cold as steel, saw only my skin, not my truth. Before I could blink, his hand cracked across my cheek, the sting a lightning bolt that silenced the crowd. My vision blurred, but my resolve didn't. Phones flashed, a digital chorus capturing the outrage, and I locked eyes with Holt, my voice low but lethal. "You've just crossed a line you can't uncross." The crowd's gasp swelled into murmurs as a street vendor, Carla, 52, a Latina woman with fire in her voice, shouted, "She's a judge. That's Judge Washington." Holt's certainty crumbled, his hand frozen mid-air, fear flickering in his pale blue eyes. I felt the burn on my cheek, but deeper was the ache of recognition. This wasn't new, not for me, not for countless others. I thought of my son, Jamal, 19, at college 200 miles away, and my sister, Aisha, 45, who'd faced her own battles with bias. This moment wasn't mine alone, it was theirs, too. Malik clutched his guitar, his fingers sketching the scene in his notebook, a raw portrait of defiance. I stood taller, my voice slicing through the chaos. "Officer, you have no authority to strike me." Holt's "back off" wavered, his radio crackling as he stepped back, the crowd pressing closer, their voices a rising tide. A flash mob nearby, practicing at Millennium Park, froze, their music halting as dancers joined the throng, amplifying the moment's weight. A 30-year-old tech worker, Raj, muttered, "This is blowing up online. He's toast." My heart pounded, not with fear but with purpose. This could be the spark Chicago needed. Carla, her vendor cart laden with tamales, pushed forward, her voice booming. "You hit a judge, hombre. This ain't over." Holt's bravado was a mask now, slipping as he saw the crowd's fury, his fellow officers arriving with tight-lipped neutrality. I refused to budge, my presence a demand for reckoning. My mind raced to my courtroom, where I'd seen too many Holts, men who wielded power like a club, unchecked by a system that shielded them. Derek Holt wasn't just a cop, he was a symptom, his smirk a mirror of every injustice I'd fought. His personnel file, I'd later learn, held whispers of complaints, 5 in 10 years, all dismissed. His swagger hit a man who thrived on control, his bias a reflex honed by years of unquestioned authority. But today, he'd met me, and I wasn't yielding. Malik's sketch took shape, my silhouette against Holt's aggression, and a cheer erupted, a wave of solidarity. I nodded to him, gratitude in my eyes, as Carla's words echoed, a vow of justice. A dancer from the flash mob, 25-year-old Mia, live-streamed the scene, her voice trembling. "Chicago, this is Judge Lena Washington, attacked by a cop. We need change." The crowd roared, phones aloft, and I felt the shift, a city waking up. Holt's eyes darted, his hand on his radio, calling for backup, but his voice betrayed him, thin and unsteady. I saw his fear, not of me but of the truth now exposed, a truth he couldn't bury. My cheek throbbed, but my spirit soared, fueled by the crowd's unity, Malik's art, Carla's courage. I thought of Jamal, how I'd teach him to stand tall, to fight for right. This was our battle now, Chicago's battle, and I was ready to lead it, not as a victim but as a force. As officers formed a line, urging the crowd back, I caught Holt's gaze one last time. His mask was gone, replaced by a raw, unmoored panic, and I wondered if he sensed the storm he'd unleashed. Carla gripped my arm, her voice fierce. "We got you, Lena. This changes everything." I nodded, my resolve ironclad. This wasn't about one slap, it was about a system that bred Holtz, about a city poised to rise. As I stepped forward, the flash mob's music resumed, a defiant beat that carried me into the fight ahead. X was already ablaze, hashtags like #JusticeForLena trending, voices from 25 to 55 demanding reform. The sting on my cheek faded, but my purpose burned bright, a cliffhanger moment that promised a reckoning I'd see through. The sting on my cheek lingered as I left Michigan Avenue and Randolph Street, the weight of that moment trailing me like a shadow, but it was the fire in my chest that drove me forward. I'm Lena Washington, a judge whose life has been about balancing scales, but now I was balancing something heavier, the personal wound of Officer Derek Holt's slap against the public cry it had unleashed. As I drove the 4 miles to my home in Hyde Park, Chicago's skyline glowed against the dusk, a city alive with whispers of change. My phone buzzed relentlessly, notifications from X flooding in, #JusticeForLena was trending, with over 3 million views in just hours. A 27-year-old nurse had posted, "This isn't just a judge, it's every black woman disrespected. Chicago, wake up." The words hit me hard, not because they were new but because they were true, echoing the stories I'd heard in my courtroom for 20 years. I pulled into my driveway, my hands trembling, not from fear but from the realization that this wasn't just my fight anymore, it was Chicago's. Inside, my sister Aisha, 45, a social worker with a heart as fierce as her braids, was waiting with my son, Jamal, 19, home from college. Their faces, lit by the soft glow of the living room lamp, held a mix of worry and pride. "Mom, it's everywhere," Jamal said, his voice cracking as he showed me his phone, a video of Holt's slap looping endlessly. I saw myself in that grainy footage, standing tall, and felt a surge of resolve, but also a pang of vulnerability. Aisha hugged me, her embrace grounding me. "Lena, you're shaking," she whispered. I admitted, "It's not the slap, it's what it means." We sat, the three of us, and I poured out the moment, Holt's cold eyes, the crowd's roar, Malik's sketch capturing my defiance, Carla's fiery stand. Jamal's jaw tightened, his youth burning with questions. "How do you keep going, Mom, when this keeps happening?" I paused, my judge's composure faltering, and said, "Because giving up lets them win. We fight, Jamal, for you, for tomorrow." His nod, quiet but fierce, was a promise, and I felt a mother's hope mingle with a judge's duty. Across town, 6 miles away in a cramped West Side apartment, Derek Holt sat alone, his badge on the table like a discarded relic. The man who'd struck me wasn't the untouchable cop he'd been hours ago. His phone glowed with venom, texts from colleagues distancing themselves, ex-posts branding him a villain. "White cop slaps black judge, career over," read one, retweeted 10,000 times. Holt's mind churned, his arrogance warring with a creeping dread. He'd grown up in a world where his badge meant control, where complaints, 6 in his file, all buried, never stuck. But now, he saw my face in his mind, not as a nameless threat but as Judge Lena Washington, a name that carried weight he hadn't fathomed. His wife, Sarah, 36, had left for her mother's, her parting words sharp, "Derek, you need to face this." Alone, he replayed the moment, my voice, "You've crossed a line," haunting him. Holt wasn't a cartoon villain. He was a man molded by a system that rewarded his bias, yet now that system was cracking, and he was falling through. His fingers hovered over his phone, tempted to post a defense, but he stopped, sensing the futility. Instead, he stared at the badge, wondering if it still defined him or if it ever should have. Back in Hyde Park, the city's pulse reached me through the radio, 104.3 FM, where a call-in show buzzed with voices from 25 to 55, my audience, Chicago's heart. A 40-year-old teacher said, "Judge Washington's strength is ours. We need reform, not apologies." A 50-year-old bus driver added, "I've seen cops like Holt my whole life. This time, we're watching." I listened, my heart swelling with their resolve, but also aching for the pain behind their words. Aisha, ever the organizer, was already texting her network, planning a vigil at Grant Park, 2 miles from the incident. "Lena, this is bigger than you," she said, her eyes alight. "People are ready." I nodded, but inside, I grappled with my new role, not just a judge, but a symbol. I thought of my father, a janitor who died when I was 15, his calloused hands teaching me to stand firm. "Lena," he'd said, "your voice is your power." Now, that voice was amplifying a city's cry, and I couldn't falter. Jamal, scrolling X, showed me a digital mural. A local artist had turned Malik's sketch into a glowing projection on a looped skyscraper, my silhouette a beacon of resistance. "This is you, Mom," he said, pride in his voice. I smiled, but my mind was on the road ahead, the weight of expectation pressing down. Outside, Chicago was moving. At Grant Park, 1,000 people gathered, their candles flickering like stars against the night. A 32-year-old activist, Tasha Green, led the charge, her megaphone a clarion call. "This isn't just about Judge Washington, it's about every black life dismissed." The crowd, young and old, chanted, "No justice, no peace." Their voices carrying 3 miles to City Hall. A 55-year-old librarian, Mr. Ellis, held a sign, "For Lena, for change." I wasn't there, but Aisha sent me photos, each face a story of resilience. I felt their energy, their hope, but also their exhaustion, decades of fighting the same fight. Tasha's coalition, born that night, planned a "Truth Wall" project, inviting residents to write their experiences of bias on a public canvas at the Art Institute, 1 mile away. The idea, fresh and bold, stirred me, art as testimony, a way to heal and demand change. I imagined Jamal adding his words, Aisha hers, a tapestry of truth Chicago couldn't ignore. My phone buzzed again, a message from Carla, the vendor from earlier, "Judge, we're with you. Keep fighting." Her words, simple but fierce, anchored me. I replied, "We fight together." Holt, meanwhile, couldn't escape the storm. His precinct, 5 miles from Grant Park, buzzed with unease, officers whispering about the Judge incident. His captain, Evelyn Carter, 58, called him in, her voice steel. "Derek, you've dragged us all into this. You're on leave, effective now." Holt's protest died in his throat as he saw her eyes, not anger, but disappointment. He left, the precinct's silence louder than any reprimand. Driving home, he passed a billboard flashing #Justice for Lena, and his grip tightened on the wheel. He wasn't ready to admit fault, not fully, but the cracks in his worldview were widening, my face a constant mirror. Holt's story wasn't over, but it was shifting, his role as villain or redeemable soul yet to be written. As I lay in bed, the city's heartbeat synced with mine. I thought of the vigil, the mural, the truth wall, new sparks of change I hadn't imagined hours ago. My cheek no longer burned, but my purpose did, a flame fed by Chicago's resolve. I whispered a promise to Jamal, to Aisha, to myself, "We'll see this through." X posts kept coming, a 35-year-old chef writing, "Judge Washington's fight is ours. Let's rebuild this city." I closed my eyes, knowing tomorrow would bring more voices, more battles, but also more hope. The fire Holt had ignited was spreading, and I was ready to guide its blaze. The Cook County Courthouse loomed before me, its stone facade a silent witness to the storm I'd carried since Derek Holt's slap 3 weeks ago. I'm Lena Washington, a judge whose life has been about truth, but now I stood as its vessel, my heart a furnace of resolve and trepidation. The courtroom, 2 miles from that fateful corner of Michigan Avenue and Randolph Street, was a cauldron of anticipation, packed with 250 spectators. Reporters, activists, everyday Chicagoans aged 25 to 55, their faces a mosaic of hope and anger. As I stepped inside, the air crackled, the weight of history pressing against my navy suit. My son, Jamal, 19, and sister, Aisha, 45, sat in the front row, their eyes anchoring me. I wasn't just Lena today, I was a symbol, a spark, and the thought both lifted and burdened me. Judge Evelyn Carter, 62, presided, her silver hair a crown of impartiality, her gaze sharp yet humane. The prosecution, led by attorney Zara Brooks, 40, a black woman whose fierce intellect I'd admired for years, stood ready, her table stacked with evidence, videos, witness statements, Holtz-buried complaints. Across the aisle, Holtz sat beside his lawyer, Paul Reed, 53, his face a mask of grim determination. Holtz's eyes, once cold with arrogance, now flickered with unease, his shoulders hunched under the scrutiny of a city watching. I saw him not as a monster but as a man forged by a flawed system, his 6 prior complaints, dismissed for lack of evidence, a testament to its failures. Yet his choice to strike me was his own, and today, that choice faced judgment. The gallery hushed as Zara rose, her voice a clarion call. Your Honor, this case isn't just about one act, it's about a culture that lets such acts thrive. My chest tightened, her words echoing the pain I'd carried, the stories I'd heard from defendants and plaintiffs alike. I thought of my father's lessons, his voice urging me to bend the arc of justice, and I steeled myself for what was to come. Zara's opening laid bare the incident. The viral video, now viewed 10 million times, showed Holt's hand striking me, my defiance in its wake. She called Malik, the busker, to the stand. At 26, his dreadlocks framed a face both nervous and resolute. I saw Judge Washington help me, he said, his voice steady. She was kind, and then that cop, he didn't even ask, just hit her. The jury, a diverse mix of Chicagoans, teachers, nurses, coders, leaned forward, their expressions shifting from curiosity to outrage. Malik's notebook, with its sketch of me standing tall, was entered as evidence, a silent witness to truth. Next came Carla, the street vendor, 52, her voice thick with emotion. I've seen cops like Holt before, judging us by our skin. But hitting a judge? That's a line too far. Her words, raw and real, struck a chord, the gallery murmuring in agreement. I felt their support, a wave lifting me, but also their exhaustion. How many times had they fought this fight? Zara's questions wove a narrative of systemic bias, each witness a thread in a tapestry Chicago couldn't ignore. A 28-year-old law student, Kai, live tweeting the trial, posted, "This is history unfolding. #Justice for Lena." I didn't see his words then, but I felt their echo, the 25 to 55 audience amplifying our story on X. When I took the stand, the room stilled, a collective breath held. Zara's question was simple, Judge Washington, what happened that day? I looked at the jury, their faces searching mine, and spoke from my core. Officer Holt saw my skin, not my actions. His slap wasn't just against me, it was against every black person judged without cause. My voice trembled, not with fear but with the weight of truth. I shared my thoughts in that moment, Jamal, Aisha, the countless faces in my courtroom, and the jury's eyes softened, some nodding, others wiping tears. Authority, I said, is a trust, not a weapon. This trial must redefine that trust. The gallery erupted in applause, quickly silenced by Judge Carter's gavel, but the energy lingered, a pulse of hope. Holt's gaze dropped, his fingers twitching, and I wondered what he felt. Shame, defiance, or something new? Paul Reed's cross-examination was gentle, probing my emotions, not my facts. Were you angry, Judge? He asked. I met his eyes. Angry, yes, but determined more. Justice demands more than anger. My words, steady and clear, were for the jury, for Chicago, for the 25 to 55-year-olds watching, yearning for change. Reed's defense was a tightrope walk, painting Holt as a stressed cop, not a racist. Derek acted in a moment of error, shaped by poor training, he argued, citing Chicago PD's outdated protocols. He called a retired officer, 60, who spoke of systemic pressures, but his words rang hollow against the video's stark truth. Holt didn't testify, his silence a void the jury filled with their own conclusions. I watched him, seeing a man unraveling, his badge no longer a shield. His past, raised in a segregated suburb, trained in a precinct that buried complaints, had shaped him, but today, he faced its consequences. Zara's closing was a masterpiece, her voice soaring. This isn't just about Derek Holt, it's about a system that fails us. Let this verdict be a step toward healing. Reed's plea was softer, asking for mercy, but the jury's faces, set and solemn, told another story. After 7 hours of deliberation, they returned, the foreman, a 45-year-old nurse, rising. We find the defendant guilty of misconduct and assault. The room exhaled, cheers erupting, but I stayed still, my heart pounding. Holt's head bowed, his lawyer's hand on his shoulder, a man facing not just a 1-year suspension but a shattered identity. As the gavel fell, I met Jamal's eyes, his pride a bomb. Aisha squeezed my hand, her whisper fierce, "You did it, Lena." But I knew, it wasn't done. The verdict was a victory, but the war against bias raged on. Outside, 1 mile away at Daly Plaza, 2,000 gathered, Tasha Green's voice booming. This is for Lena, for us. A new initiative, a justice choir, formed there, residents singing protest songs, their harmonies a call to action. I didn't join them yet, but their music reached me, a promise of unity. Holt left the courthouse, reporters swarming, his silence louder than any defense. I wondered if he'd reflect, if he'd change, or if his story ended here, a cautionary tale. Zara approached, her smile weary but warm. This is just the start, Lena. I nodded, my mind on the truth wall at the Art Institute, now covered in 500 stories of bias, each a step toward reform. My cheek no longer stung, but my purpose burned brighter, fueled by the jury's courage, the city's voice, the choir's song. As I stepped into the sunlight, Chicago's skyline gleamed, a city poised for change, and I vowed to lead it forward, one truth at a time. The verdict against Derek Holt echoed in my soul as I left the Cook County Courthouse, its weight both a triumph and a call to keep pushing. I'm Lena Washington, a judge whose life has been about justice, but now I was planting seeds for a future where justice wasn't just a verdict but a way of life. The 2-mile drive from the courthouse to my home in Hyde Park felt different today, Chicago's skyline shimmering with possibility, as if the city itself was exhaling after holding its breath. My phone buzzed with messages from strangers and friends, 25 to 55 years old, all part of this awakening. A 38-year-old chef had posted on X, Judge Washington's fight is planting roots. Let's grow change. The hashtag Justice for Lena still trended, now paired with hashtag Chicago Rising, a digital rallying cry for the reform I felt pulsing through the city. At home, my son, Jamal, 19, and sister, Aisha, 45, greeted me with hugs that spoke louder than words. Jamal's eyes, bright with purpose, met mine. Mom, people are doing things, real things, because of you. I smiled, but my heart was heavy with responsibility. The trial was over, but the work was just beginning, and I wondered if I could carry this mantle, not just as a judge, but as a mother, a sister, a beacon for a city yearning to heal. Aisha, ever the visionary, was already sketching plans for a community summit, her notebook filled with ideas. Lena, she said, this is our chance to rebuild trust, not just protest it. Her words sparked something in me, a vision of Chicago not just reacting but creating, and I vowed to nurture that spark. Across town, 5 miles away in a dim precinct office, Derek Holt sat on administrative leave, his badge stripped of its shine. The man who'd slapped me was no longer the untouchable cop he'd once been, he was a ghost in his own life, haunted by the guilty verdict and the 1-year suspension that followed. Holt's apartment, cluttered with unopened bills, mirrored his mind. Chaotic, unmoored. His wife, Sarah, 36, had returned, but her eyes held a quiet demand for change. "Derek, you can't hide from this," she said, her voice soft but firm. Holt's arrogance, once his armor, was crumbling, replaced by a raw, unfamiliar shame. He'd grown up believing his badge made him right, his 6 buried complaints proof of his invincibility. Now, those complaints, each a story of bias ignored, loomed like shadows, and my face, defiant in that viral video, was a constant mirror. He scrolled X, seeing posts like, "Holt's done, but what about the system," from a 30-year-old coder. The words stung, not because they were cruel but because they were true. Holt wasn't ready to apologize, not yet, but he felt the system he trusted betraying him, too, and that betrayal gnawed at him, a seed of doubt in his rigid worldview. He stared at a flyer for a community forum, slipped under his door by an anonymous neighbor, and wondered if facing people like me, people he'd dismissed, might change something in him. Back in Hyde Park, I stepped into action, driven by the city's momentum. Mayor Carla Evans, 50, had formed a reform task force, 40 citizens and 20 officers meeting weekly at City Hall, 1 mile from the courthouse. I joined their first session, held in a glass-walled room overlooking the Chicago River, where voices from all corners of the city clashed and converged. Tasha Green, the 32-year-old activist, spoke with fire. "We need cops who know our names, not just our skin." A 55-year-old retired officer, Mr. Coleman, nodded, his voice steady. "Training failed Holt, failed us all. Let's fix it." The task force unveiled bold policies: 10 hours of annual bias training, mandatory body cams on every shift, a 24/7 civilian complaint hotline staffed by 15 volunteers. I felt hope, but also caution. Policies were only as strong as the will behind them. I shared my story, not as a judge but as Lena, a black woman who'd felt the sting of prejudice. "Change starts with truth," I said, my voice trembling with conviction. The room listened, their faces reflecting a shared resolve, and I knew these seeds could grow if we tended them together. Beyond policy, Chicago was blooming with grassroots efforts. At Harold Washington Library, 1.5 miles from City Hall, I launched a mentorship program for black teens, inspired by Jamal's passion. 30 kids, aged 14 to 18, gathered in a sunlit room, their eyes curious but guarded. I saw myself in them, the girl who'd lost her father at 15 but found strength in his lessons. "You're the future of justice," I told them, pairing each with a lawyer or activist mentor. One girl, Nia, 16, said, "I want to be like you, Judge Washington, but I'm scared." Her honesty pierced me, and I knelt beside her. "Fear means you're fighting for something real," I said, my hand on hers. That moment, raw and tender, was a seed of change, one I'd nurture for years. Meanwhile, at Pilsen's 18th Street, 3 miles away, Tasha's coalition hosted a Healing Canvas workshop, where 150 residents painted murals of unity on community center walls. Carla, the vendor, joined, her brush strokes bold, depicting hands clasped across divides. "This is for you, Lena," she told me later, her smile warm. I visited, moved by the colors, the stories, each mural a testament to a city refusing to stay broken. A new initiative, a listening booth, at Navy Pier, 2 miles from the incident, caught my heart. Volunteers, including Malik, set up a pop-up where anyone could share their experiences of bias, recorded for a city archive. A 45-year-old nurse spoke of being profiled, a 25-year-old barista shared her hope for reform. I listened to their recordings, tears in my eyes, each voice a thread in Chicago's tapestry. The booth drew 500 visitors in a week, its impact rippling online, where a podcast, Voices of Chicago, launched, reaching 15,000 listeners. Malik, now a coalition member, told me, "Your stand gave us this, Judge." I shook my head. It's ours, Malik. His smile, shy but proud, reminded me why I fought. Holt, too, felt the city's shift, passing the listening booth on a rare walk. He didn't stop, but the voices, raw, unfiltered, stayed with him, challenging his silence. His suspension left him adrift, but the booth's flyer burned in his pocket, a question he wasn't ready to answer. As I spoke at a summit at the DuSable Museum, for miles from home, to 300 residents, I felt the seeds taking root. Justice isn't a moment, it's a movement, I said, my voice carrying the weight of our journey. The crowd, diverse and determined, applauded, their energy a promise. Aisha, beside me, whispered, "This is what Dad meant, your voice, Lena." I nodded, thinking of Jamal, now mentoring with me, and the teens like Nia, painting murals, sharing stories. Chicago was changing, not just in policy but in spirit, and I was part of it, not above it. Holt's story, too, was unfinished, his doubt a seed that might grow or wither. As I drove home, the city's lights gleamed, each one a story, a hope, a seed. I knew the harvest was far off, but with every mural, every voice, every policy, we were sowing a future where justice could thrive. The Chicago skyline sparkled under a twilight glow, each light a story of resilience, a testament to a city reborn. I stood on the stage at the historic Regal Theater in Bronzeville, 3 miles from my Hyde Park home, my heart brimming with the journey that had unfolded since Derek Holt's slap 6 months ago. I'm Lena Wright, a judge who'd faced injustice and found purpose in its wake, not just for myself but for a community that had transformed pain into progress. The Unity in Action festival pulsed around me, 2,800 Chicagoans aged 25 to 54 filling the air with laughter and gospel harmonies. A celebration of change sparked 2.5 miles from that Michigan Avenue corner. My son, Jamal, 20, stood beside me, his camera capturing the crowd for a youth-led digital archive, his college ambition now tied to this city's future. "Mom, this is forever," he said, his voice thick, as he showed me a post on X, Judge Wright's stand rebuilt Chicago. #Unity4Justice, 12M views. A 31-year-old librarian's words, "Lena's courage is our blueprint," stirred me, but my gaze lingered on the horizon, wondering if this change could last. Aisha Carter, my sister, 45, the festival's architect, hugged me, her braids swinging. "Lena, we're making Dad's dream real," she said, her eyes echoing our father's hope, a janitor who died when I was 15, urging me to speak truth. I whispered back, "For him, for us." The weight of our journey, outrage, trial, reform, felt like a torch, and I was ready to pass it forward, my voice echoing through a new Chicago. The Regal's theater hummed with life, families, activists, artists, even officers, their stories woven into a vibrant mosaic. Kara Thompson, a 34-year-old activist who'd rallied for us since day one, greeted me with a fierce grin. "Lena, this is your spark," she said, pointing to a justice tapestry, 80 woven panels from residents, each a story of bias overcome, displayed beside murals from Pilsen's Unity walls. I shook my head, grounded by humility. "It's ours, Kara." She introduced a new initiative, Youth Vision Lab, where 25 teens, mentored by kids like Jamal Carter, designed apps for civic justice, one tracking police reform progress. A 16-year-old, Amari, showed her app's prototype, her eyes alight. "This is for you, Judge Wright." My throat tightened, moved by her fire, seeing my younger self in her, the girl who'd been when she'd faced slurs at a bus stop. I hugged her, proud of a generation claiming their voice, and Jamal Carter, filming nearby, nodded, his documentary a bridge to their future. The festival wasn't a moment but a movement, a sapling of justice rooted in Chicago's soul, nurtured by the 25 to 54 crowd who'd come to build, not just celebrate. Across town, 7 miles away in a quiet Englewood rec center, David Holt stood at a crossroads, his life a shadow of the cop who'd struck me. His resignation, forced after a year's suspension, had stripped his badge, leaving a man wrestling with his past. Holt, 39, had once thrived on control, his 7 buried complaints proof of a system that shielded him. But the listening booth's 1,800 voices, stories of pain like mine, had cracked his armor. He'd started coaching teens at the rec center, a program born from our reforms. A 15-year-old, Darius Carter, challenged him, "Why should I listen to you?" Holt's reply, raw and halting, "Because I'm learning from my mistakes," wasn't absolution, but a seed. He wasn't redeemed, not fully, but he was trying, his story a faint thread in Chicago's weave, a man facing the system he'd once embodied. Holt's presence at the center rec, coaching a basketball game tonight, was small but real, a question of whether he could grow beyond his shame. At the festival, I stepped to the mic, the choir's song fading as 2,800 faces turned to me. My pulse quickened, but my voice held firm. "Chicago, we've turned a wound into a world of hope." I shared our victories: misconduct complaints down 25% in 2025, city data showed, 60 schools taught anti-bias, reaching 50,000 students. The hotline now fielded 700 calls monthly. But I dug deeper, my heart bare. This isn't my story, it's yours, from Marcus's sketches to Amaze's Dreams app, from Kara's rallies to Hassan's murals tapestry. The crowd roared, their energy a tide lifting me. I saw Aisha Carter in the wings, her smile our father's echo, and Jamal Carter, his lens framing history. "We can't stop," I urged. "Vote, mentor, weave, every act is justice." I told of Amaze, now eyeing law school, and the crowd cheered, their hope aflame. The Justice Tapestry, unveiled beside a youth choir's anthem, held a patch by a 65-year-old retiree, reading, "For Lena Carter, for tomorrow." I touched it, Chicago's heartbeat in every stitch, a legacy for my audience to carry. A new Civic Harmony Day was announced for 2026, aiming for 15,000 at Garfield Park, 4 miles away, and I saw a future unbound. The festival spilled outside, a vibrant fair with food stalls and a dance floor where gospel fused with hip-hop, Chicago's pulse in every beat. I danced with Amaze, her joy infectious, and Kara announced a Justice Lens exhibit, a VR experience at the Chicago History Museum, 2 miles away, letting users walk in others' shoes, drawing 3,000 visitors weekly. Jamal Carter pulled me aside, his voice resolute. "Mom, I'm staying here, fighting with you." Tears fell, not for that slap but for his courage, my son a hero. I hugged him, whispering, "You're my strength." Aisha Carter joined, her summit now a citywide council, 400 leaders shaping policy. "We're living Dad's dream," she said, and I nodded, our father's lessons alive. Holt, at the center rec, didn't know our joy, but his coaching, however tentative, was a parallel step, a man seeking a new path. His story, though distant, wove into Chicago's, a faint hope amid its bold answers. As I left the theater, the tapestry's threads lingered in my mind, each patch a victory, a voice. Driving home, I passed the Art Institute's Truth Wall, 2,500 stories strong, and Navy Pier's listening booth, its archive at 150,000 online views. The Voices of Chicago podcast hit 25,000 listeners weekly, urging my 25 to 54 audience, vote, mentor, post on X, your act shapes justice. Reflecting on my journey, I saw lessons etched deep: courage turns pain into purpose, unity trumps division. Every voice, from Marcus's to Amaze's, builds change. That slap wasn't my end but my beginning, a spark that lit a city. I learned to lead not alone but with Chicago, to trust its heart. Holt's lesson, still unfolding, taught me even villains can shift, if they listen. To you, my reader, I ask, if you faced racism, hidden power, or broken systems, how would you act to forge the best outcome? Would you stand, speak, or build, knowing each step shapes tomorrow? At home, I stood on my porch, Chicago's lights a constellation of hope. For you, Dad, I whispered, my voice firm. This horizon, not a dream but a reality we'd woven, hand in hand, was a Chicago where justice lived, a legacy eternal.